Welcome to the Artistic Finance Podcast, where we break down the wall between art and money. If you're here looking for how to be an artist and financially sustain a career, you're in the right place. Keep listening and join us as we learn about artists and how they make money work for them. Hello everyone, this is your host Ethan Steimel here for episode 10. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to anyone listening from down under. If you have time, please leave a rating and review so we can keep expanding our audience. Today's guest is lighting designer Trudy Dalgleish. Based in Sydney, Australia, Trudy was the lighting director at the Sydney Entertainment Centre for 7 years, where she designed opera, ballet, circus, ice skating, rock concerts, and sporting events. She has designed for Opera New Zealand, Victorian Opera, and West Australian Opera. For the Gordon Frost organization, she has designed In the Heights, Saturday Night Fever, Legends, and Fame. She lit the Australian tours of the arena versions of Grease and Hairspray. She has won many design awards, including 3 Green Room Awards for Hairspray, West Side Story, and Eureka the Musical. Without further ado, let's get to our interview. Welcome, Trudy, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here from the other side of the world.
Yeah, and I just want to start off by saying this is May 28th, 2020 that we're recording.
It's May 29th for me.
Oh, right. So it's the 28th and 29th, but either way, it's in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, shutdown.
Correct.
At least we're still shut down here in New York City.
Well, we're kind of still shut down here too, so... Yeah, well, though things are opening up here, which is really lovely, and you're allowed to go and visit people and have people for dinner, so it's not as bad as it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and then the other thing I'll just point out, which doesn't really matter, is that it's 7 p.m. for me here, and it's 9 a.m. tomorrow for you.
Correct.
You know, I have a drink in my hand, you have coffee in your hand.
And I've just got out of the shower, correct.
I did too, I just went for my jog. I was like, oh, gotta go jogging. Okay, so, and then I'm just going to say that we met when you came to New York City in January. I was the associate, the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof, lighting designer Peter Kazarowski, who was guest 1 on this podcast. Your company in Australia, or in Sydney, was going to put on the production, and so you came to sort of get the paperwork, see the focus, see the lights. Anyway, so that's where we interacted.
Correct, that's very correct, yes, on a very cold January Sunday morning.
Could you give us a 2-minute recap of your life and how you got to where you are now?
Okie dokes, I can do that. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I was raised in Canberra, which is our national capital. Not many people know that. Everybody thinks that either Sydney or Melbourne. But it's actually Canberra, which is a tiny little bush town in the middle of nowhere. Kind of like Brazil. You know how Brazil went and built another capital city in the middle of nowhere? Well, so did we. It was great. And in Canberra, the last 2 years of high school, you actually go to another school, and it's a bit like university. So the last 2 years of high school, you kind of put in another school, and the school, you can choose, you know, units like you do with university, and it just prepares you better for university. I was the first year to go through that process in Canberra. The school they built had a fully functioning theatre, a fully functioning TV studio, a fully functioning radio station. We had our own car to learn to drive in, so it was very progressive. It was a state school, so it was a government school, and I just fell in love with lighting there. So after that, I started taking odd jobs around Canberra at the Canberra Theatre and the Canberra Rep. I applied for NIDA, which is National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney, when I finished school, which is kind of the equivalent of RADA in UK, and I think maybe Yale in New York. It's where you go to learn, you know, how to be a lighting designer or a technical person. I didn't get in that year because I was only 17. I went to uni and did prehistory and anthropology for 2.5 years. So basically I just went to uni so I could muck around in theatre. You know, I did something that my parents wanted me to do, which was go to university. But after another 2 years, I reapplied for NIDA and got into NIDA. So they accept 15 people out of 7,000 applicants a year.
Whoa. Wow.
So I applied for the technical production course, which was 3 years full-time. That course, you basically learned how to do everything. So you had to do wardrobe, set, building, props making, then you could do lighting, sound. So it was just an overall kind of introduction to theatre, really. And in the last year, you could specialise in what you wanted to do. So that's when I got back into lighting. When I left there, it basically churns you out as a stage manager or an assistant stage manager. So when I left there, I went to Sydney Theatre Company as an ASM and hated it. So it was not what I wanted to do. So I basically left theatre for 10 years and I went into rock and roll. So for 10 years, I worked at the Sydney Entertainment Centre in the 1980s. So saw every major band come through in the 80s and also the new technology. You know, we went from park hands to scrollers and suddenly there was moving lights. You know, I still remember the first time I saw a VL1. And so that was pretty amazing time to be in that industry.
A VL1, I should say, now dead technology.
Very dead technology. And no wonder, you know, if you didn't have one of those online, you couldn't actually plot it. You know, if there was one light missing, you just couldn't plot it, which was really bad. Anyway, so that was great. You know, that was a really, really good foundation. After about 10 years, I got a bit tired of the rock and roll life. So I thought, oh, well, I'll go back to theatre. And I was just really, really lucky that was the cusp of when moving lights were coming into musical theatre. And so there was nobody in Australia that really, in theatre, that knew anything about moving lights. So I was fortunate enough to be the associate for Beauty and the Beast, Natasha Katz's Beauty and the Beast, which was the first kind of major musical in Australia to use moving lights. So from there, you know, I did a lot of associate. I was head electrician for quite a few shows, so I came up through the nuts and bolts of actually putting shows in and up, which was quite unusual then for a woman. You know, there was a lot of kind of both, though the 10 years in rock and roll certainly prepared me for, you know, for any grief I'd get about being a woman. Because sometimes at the entertainment centre I'd be the only girl in like 60 loaders, you know, during a bump in or out. So that was quite character building.
Wow. I want to ask years-ish, like what year did you get back into theatre-ish?
About 93. About 1993 I got back. And it was, you know, it was the very, very start. And so, you know, I did a few associates and then I started doing some designs myself. And because I was the only one using moving lights, I kind of cornered a market and had a lot of major musicals. And, yeah, I've worked for, you know, all the major companies in Australia, Sydney Theatre Company, Sydney Dance Company, Australian Opera. I do quite a bit of opera around the place. I like opera, except if they're 6 hours long and boring. But
which they are.
I know. I'm lucky. I get really short ones, or they get me to do the Sondheim or the, you know. So I'm quite lucky in that respect. Done a lot of work overseas. You know, in Australia, you do a lot of work in Asia, which is very difficult. China especially is extremely difficult to work in. Yeah, done some West End. The only show of mine that has got to New York was Steel City at Radio City Music Hall. That was many years ago, but that's my only kind of New York work, apart from being an associate.
Maybe we can get some people to listen to this that can take another show to New York. Be like, Trudy needs another show in New York.
Absolutely, that'd be lovely once we're over all of this and once you're over all of this. I also do a lot of work in the Middle East, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. I do a lot of ceremonies, you know, opening and closing ceremonies, big arena stuff. Yeah, so that's basically me in a nutshell.
Amazing. Trudy, when the world gets turning again, if you need an assistant or an associate on any of those Asia, Middle East, or Australian ones.
That's the trouble, you know, you guys are so spoilt. You know, we when I do an original design here, it's me and my programmer, and if I'm lucky, a follow spot caller. But, you know, we don't have assistants or associates, or the only time we have associates is if, you know, one of your shows comes from Broadway to Australia, and then, you know, there's an associate put on. But, you know, if it's an original Australian design, no way on the face of the universe. But I would love to have you. I would love to have you.
Well, whenever you get a fee that's just too big for you to handle, and you're like, well, I'll just give half of it to somebody else. Ethan, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure you have that problem often.
when we're able to get on planes again, our borders are closed, so you actually can't fly into Australia at the present moment. So, we're basically, we locked down really early, and I can see our borders being closed until at least the end of the year.
Nicole and I, we've been planning for years a trip to Australia, because that's like a big trip to do. We've been following Qantas Airlines was going to have a New York to Sydney nonstop, and they've had it planned for like 4 or 5 years. And so every year we sort of check in to be like, yeah, there's an article about it. They're still planning it. And this year they did test flights. It's like a 21-hour flight or something. Anyway, I think COVID-19 has stopped that plan.
Correct. But you can always come via Los Angeles or San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally willing to do it. But it's also just stopped the plan of going to Australia this year. We were going to do it in December. And
it would have been perfect.
Even if things open up by then, which I don't think they will, we wouldn't have enough time to sort of plan it into our lives.
Well, hopefully you can come very soon.
I hope so. Okay, and then also I just want to address, you say we're very spoiled. Really only on like Broadway and big shows are there assistants and associates.
Okay.
All the stuff I do mostly is just me. Sometimes I have to program for myself. Actually, very often, because
me too.
The scale of things I work on are smaller.
I mean, I kind of enjoy it, especially for like, concerts and stuff like that, or benefits. I love like programming offline and stuff like that. And I think it makes you a better designer and a better associate, if you can understand the process of, what your programmer goes through. I always appreciate, I've had one programmer now for 18 years, Jason Fripp, and he programs all my shows. He's just been out with Hugh Jackman on his world tour as the lighting director. But he's great, and it's kind of a real shorthand now. And it's like, I always say, it's like putting on a comfy pair of slippers when I work with Jason.
That's awesome. Okay, so now we're going to get to know your creative personality a little bit. What is a live event that you love to experience as an audience member?
I'd really have to say rock concerts. So having seen the best of everybody that came through the Sydney Entertainment Centre in the 80s, I'd have to say for pure spectacle, even though I don't really like their music, for pure spectacle it'd have to be Pink Floyd. Inflatables, things going everywhere, listening to Mark, the LD or technical director, try and call that show was just incredible every night. Yeah, I'd have to say that for pure spectacle. But I just love the audience in a rock concert, and I love the way that lighting can make people roar, like even turning the house lights off. Do you know what I mean? It's just
Yep.
It's just a phenomenal atmosphere to be in. I love arenas. I love lighting arenas. And I love being in them, in an audience kind of way as well. Yeah, so I'd have to say anything that was big and live, and Pink Floyd does kind of stand out as a, gobsmacking moment, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another one of our guests was talking about spectacle, because they love like the Super Bowl here or a big football game, just because it's so ridiculous. It's just so overdone, and everything, just because you're in an arena, everything is scaled up. Other than like a space shuttle launching, it's like, how do you get a more spectacle than that on the planet? You don't. Like, arenas are the big spectacle.
Yeah. No, I love them. Lots of toys to play with, and just the audience vibe. I mean, I so hope we get back to that one day.
We will.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, what is a piece of art that you like?
That's a really, really hard one. I studied art history at school and at uni, and I love art from every age. I love 20th century sculpture. I like Rembrandt. I love Kandinsky, Dali. I love Turner for his skies. I love all art. I have a lot of art books, and I just love going through and looking at pictures and paintings. I think visually, the most amazing thing that we have in the world is art, I think. I can't pin, something. It's just I'm really inspired by art and love it. I love how the human brain, can produce these amazing visual, pictures, which I suppose is the same as our kind of industry, except their paintings don't get burnt. I always think of lighting design as, you do this amazing lighting design and it's never seen again. It's destroyed, it's not destroyed, but it's just never seen again. It's lovely that they can put their art into something that can, survive for centuries. I love architecture too. I think that's the same thing, I love art and architecture. I think I love shape and form, really.
So when you are going to design or something, where do you pull your inspiration from?
Nature for me is a real inspiration for everything. I'm lucky enough to live near a beach. I have a house up an hour and a half out of Sydney called Avoca Beach. I love the beach and I love how the sea and the sky changes completely all the time. Every 5 minutes it's different. So I guess I'd have to say nature. And also in Australia, our light is so bright. You see it in Australian lighting designers' work that we're more saturated colours. We're not pastels or, we just go for like saturated. And I think that's a reaction to how much light that we have in our world and how vibrant our environment still is. I mean, I'm sitting here surrounded by trees and I can see like 50 different greens in the trees and it's amazing. I love the beach.
Me too. What music do you listen to?
I'd have to be really boring and say I'm mostly an 80s girl, so I love, 80s music. I love the Pretenders, Joan Armatrading, the Cranberries. I grew up listening to Elton John as a kid, I love his music. Warren Zevon. I love Bruce Springsteen, a lot of Bruce Springsteen. I know that's a very rock thing. A lot of Australian bands as well, like, I don't know if you've heard of any of them, Midnight Oil, Hoodoo Gurus, AC/DC.
Yeah, that one.
So I also love, I grew up, my dad loved Glenn Miller.
Oh, yeah.
So big band music, Nina Simone, Otis Redding. I quite like classical music, When my brain's too busy, I like to listen to Mozart. A big cross-section. I love music and always have, which is why I love, lighting musicals, because you like the music. And which is why I loved the rock and roll for 10 years as well.
Have you ever watched the movie with Jimmy Stewart, The Glenn Miller Story?
Yes, I have.
When I was younger, I watched it time and time again. I loved it.
I love the music, but it's sad in the end.
Yeah, it's true. I think,
but yeah.
I want to say it was on videotape, and it was like 2 tapes. Like, it must have been a long movie.
Yeah.
I've never talked about that movie with anyone.
Oh, there you go. What music do you like?
Just everything. I mean, American country music is something I like a lot.
Oh, no. Country and Western is my worst. I just see tumbleweeds tumbling across those. I go, arr, arr, arr. Are you from the country?
Well, I'm from the middle of the USA. I'm from a state called Missouri. It's Midwest, yeah, sort of. But it was from the suburbs, so like I wasn't really in the country, but I just like the music.
Fair enough. No, that's good. It's good to have diverse tastes.
Yeah. What are some of your hobbies?
I don't have any. I don't have time for hobbies, really. I mean, since COVID-19, I've been thinking what I could do because it's kind of driving me crazy mentally. I need a bit more stimulation. When I was a kid, I was a really good sailor. So, I was an Australian champion in sailing and up until my very late teens. I'd love to do more of that. So maybe now's the time to think about, buying a boat. I'm really, really happiest when I'm near water or in it or on it. So probably that'd be a really good hobby, an expensive hobby, but a really good hobby. I don't know anybody in our industry who has time for hobbies, really. Well, not here anyway, because we're all working so hard all the time. I do love cooking. Cooking for me is a recreational activity. So maybe that would be it. I really do enjoy making good food and sharing it.
A lot of people say cooking, and Nicole and I are kind of like cook to live, like cook because we have to eat food.
Oh, okay.
And I just sort of feel weird because everyone's like, I love cooking. And I'm like...
it's a means to an end for you.
Yeah. I was like, I just want to take a pill and never have to eat a meal again.
Oh, no. That's terrible.
But the science doesn't exist, so I can't do that.
No, thank God.
I definitely think you should get a boat. definitely.
Yeah, I do. I do too. A nice sedate boat. Not a racing boat like I used to. But yeah, I'd love to. Up the coast, there's plenty of room and there's mooring and stuff like that. So it's probably a good possibility. But it depends on how long this goes on for, really.
So what you're saying is you need to buy it tomorrow.
Yeah, probably.
And for me, you're in tomorrow, so that means today for you.
That's true. I should have bought it yesterday.
Yeah, so this way when Nicole and I finally do get down to Australia, you'll already have had the boat for a year or two, and you'll know everything about it.
Exactly, and I'll definitely take you for a sail.
I'll have to make sure to come when you're between shows. And then sometime when I'm on the 21-hour flight, you'll somehow book a gig and I'll show up and be like, I'm ready. And you're like, sorry, I got to take this gig.
No, never. You're always most welcome.
Awesome. Oh, I actually did want to follow up a question about the boat because it sounded like your capital was landlocked, right? Where you grew up?
Yeah, correct. But we had a lake.
Ah, okay.
So it was built around, because it was a manufactured city, they made a lake. So they basically dammed a river.
Yep.
And made a lake called Lake Burley Griffin. And that's where I learnt to sail. And it was great to learn to sail there because it was surrounded by mountains. Mm-hmm. Canberra is the only city in Australia where it snows. So it was surrounded by mountains. So the wind shifts were really, really difficult to read. So we became really, really good sailors because, the wind was always shifting. I used to cheat because there was cows and farms on the mountains, and a cow always turns with their bum into the wind.
Yep.
So you could always tell when a wind shift was coming because the cows on the mountain would shift. So you could actually read it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good fun, but it was hard and it was cold. You had to wear a wetsuit when you were sailing is how cold it was.
Wow.
Which is very unusual in Australia.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so now we know your creative personality, so now your financial personality. Could you describe your demographics for us? I feel like we've picked some up already. But
I'm a white woman. I'm in my 50s. I have 2 degrees, a degree in technical production and an arts degree in prehistory and anthropology. Born and bred in Canberra. I live in Sydney. I work all around the world. I'm lucky to be home 6 months out of the year in a normal year. And when I am home, if I'm not working, I'm always up the coast, sitting on the beach or in the water, in the surf. We've got a great surf beach here. I have a partner who I've had for 18 years. We have 3 dogs, which is difficult when I'm away all the time. That's about it. That's me. Really, in a nutshell.
Are you bad with money or are you a money wizard?
I really love making it. I love working. I really love making it, but I'm not very good at making it work for me. So, I'm good at making it and I put it in the bank, but I don't really have that much interest in looking after it or, investing or doing stuff like that. Anything to do with accountancy just kind of leaves me dead, I have to say. I just I try and do really well. And I have done well, but, I could have done a lot more with my money instead of just, putting it in the bank. But, yeah, I do love making it. I love working.
So then are you a saver or a spender?
Well, I'm kind of both, really. I do save and I don't feel comfortable unless I have a certain amount in the bank. And I make myself always have a line that I won't go below in my bank account, just as a buffer zone. But I won't hesitate to splurge on something I really want. Financially, I definitely say I'm risk adverse. I won't hesitate to go on multiple international holidays a year and splurge my money that way at all.
Yeah, okay. When you were growing up, did you have a good financial example?
Yeah, I grew up in a middle-class family in Canberra. My dad was an engineer. My mum was a stay-at-home mum until we were about 10, and then she went out to work purely because she wanted something to do with her brain. They were good role models financially. They were careful with money. So I guess I learnt from that. We were really comfortable, but I mean, I guess Dad had a lot of overseas trips. He sailed a lot and went to world championships, and that's maybe where the money went. Upkeeping a boat and sending Dad to world championships. We were comfortable, but we didn't splurge on stuff. So I think that was a really good model. Though no one ever taught me how to manage money, or it was kind of a household where money wasn't talked about. We didn't get pocket money or anything, but, if we were going out or whatever, we'd just ask Mum for some money and she'd give us $5 and, it was kind of like that.
Yeah. Okay, so at the start of your career, when you got out of school, what did your finances look like then?
Non-existent, basically. I mean, my dad didn't want me to go into theatre as a job, so I had to get a scholarship to go to NIDA because he wouldn't support me. My mum supported me financially, but Dad wasn't really keen, so I got a scholarship to going through there. So when I got out of NIDA, I basically had nothing in the bank. But I got work straight away. And I also worked when I was at NIDA. I was one of the few people that I did slides on the original Vita.
Wow.
So I was up there operating slides at night.
That's cool.
I got work in the industry when I was at NIDA. So, yeah, I had very, very little money in the bank when I came out, but I got work straight away, so it wasn't a problem.
Awesome. I mean, you sound like a hard worker.
I love working.
Which, I mean, in theater, I feel like you have to be. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be prepared to do, like 12 to 16 hours a day every day, to be successful, I think.
Yeah. Have there been any events in your life that sort of changed how you perceived money?
No, I've always, that hasn't worried me. As I said, anything to do with finances just leaves me cold. I wasn't scared of any financial crisis because, we have superannuation, which is pension plans, and, I was in it for the long term, so I knew that any losses that I had, I would get again, with investing, just keeping it there and it would grow again. The death of my parents gave me a more secure financial base as I received an inheritance which enabled me to buy my house up the coast here, which has been a great haven for me and my extended family for like 18 years. And having this kind of buffer zone enabled me to be a bit more confident in choosing kind of what work I wanted to do and being able to say no to ones I didn't want to do. The death of my parents had probably, was a, huge financial stability for both me and my brother. So
yeah. Do you just have one brother?
Yeah, that's it. And one niece. We're a very small family these days. But yeah, they come up every year for summer holidays to the coast house, and my niece has been coming since she was 6 months old. She's now 21 this year. So
yeah, if you buy a house and you get I don't know if you got a mortgage. I do
have a small mortgage on this beach house. Yes.
Here you paid off over 30 years?
It's 25 here usually, but you can write your own. You can do it 15, you can do it 20. The reason, I suppose I do think about money because the reason I still have a mortgage on this is I have a self-contained flat downstairs in the beach house and I rent that out, which covers the cost. And for tax purposes, I continue to have a mortgage so I can write off any money that I spend on here because I have a mortgage and a tenant. So I suppose I do think about things a little bit. But
yeah, look at you being smart.
A lot of people in Australia do that, So, the government's pretty good at, giving investors tax breaks. So.
Yeah, same here, sort of. We had a recent tax change where the mortgage deduction sort of went away or it's not as good. I don't actually quite know, but historically, yes, mortgage deductions were good, but now not so much.
Well, in New York, you'd be hard-pressed to even try and buy something, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm talking about the whole country. New York City as a whole.
Different kettle of fish. Yeah.
Yeah, we're never going to buy anything here. Have you had any health challenges? And maybe this is an American question, because here, if you have a health problem, it can rack up like $200,000 of debt.
Yeah. I've never had any health problems and certainly nothing that has affected my ability to work. But if I did, we have free health care. Our whole country, no matter what you have or how many, bills you rack up, it's free, which we're very, very lucky I couldn't imagine it any other way, actually. I think I couldn't imagine. I can't imagine what you guys go through. People who don't seek medical attention because they can't afford to pay for it, I'm appalled. I really, I know that's a strong word, but it's so unfair. And you pay taxes, and those taxes should go to free healthcare. It should go to looking after people when they've finished working. I'm just speechless sometimes. The richest country in the world, and they can't afford to pay your healthcare. It's just wrong. I mean, considering how much money you spend on defence.
Yes.
Against who?
Against who? It is a painful thing when you look at the military budget, and it's like, you could take, I'm making up numbers, but it's like 300 trillion for the military budget. 1 trillion could cover all the healthcare costs for 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm glad we have our priorities, that buying tanks is more important than, taking care of us.
I know. No, we're very lucky, So if anything did happen to me, or, I'd be looked after. So, it's not a cost that we even have to consider.
Yeah. Okay, so on a daily basis, do you worry about money?
At the moment, yes. Purely because I have no idea when I'm going to work again, or when I'm going to get income. In normal times, probably yes as well, because that's life of a freelancer. And no matter how good you are or how many shows you have, you never know where the next show's coming from, or if the next show's coming. So it's kind of a bit stressful. So yeah, probably I do think about money daily at the present moment, but that's only because I don't know where the next paycheck is going to come from. I mean, the government's been really good here. They brought in a thing called JobKeeper, which enables companies to retain their workers. So they'll pay, a part wage each week to people for the next 6 months. So, at least there is some money coming in to pay the bills and buy food and stuff like that. So,
and is that through your work at the opera company?
No, so I'm a company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm a company basically, and when people want me to work for them, they'll employ my company to go and do a lighting design.
Got it. Okay, cool. When you have excess money, where do you put it?
Probably travel would be the biggest. I mean, I'm really lucky. I go, on holidays 2 or 3 times a year. I should be in Croatia at the present moment. I know.
We have one listener in Croatia. I don't know who or why.
Well, I should be in Croatia doing the beautiful sailing down the Croatian coast as we speak. Yeah, definitely travel is where most of my money goes. I like a good meal, but I've decided that, going to a good restaurant and spending money. I mean, I really enjoy cooking myself, and it's probably sometimes most of the time I go to a restaurant and I don't really enjoy it because I can cook better at home. So
yeah, there's a big complaint about restaurants that they add salt at every stage of the preparation.
We're so lucky here also to have such fresh produce and really good, organic stuff, and so it's a pleasure to kind of cook with ingredients. We have a farmers market here at the beach every week, where all the farms around the place come in and sell their produce. So food's good here, which is great.
Nicole and I are watching a dessert show from Australia, Zumbo's Just Desserts.
Zumbo's shop is in my suburb in Sydney. So when you come, you can line up at Zumbo's with the other 50 people, social distancing, of course.
Of course.
And buy a macaroon.
Yeah. I don't know if you've watched his show.
I have. I think I watched one and I found him really uncomfortable. It was like he was really shy and uncomfortable, and it didn't really work for me. He worked better when he was on MasterChef, which is a different TV program, and he would come in and he would set the contestants a dessert that they had to make, and I think that's where he became really popular. And then the spin-off was his own show, but I don't think he's the type to do his own show. So I just felt really uncomfortable watching him, so I've only seen it once.
I mean, the thing I find out is that his assistant is Brazilian.
Oh, that's us. We're so like you, we're very multicultural. So, yeah.
Okay, so throughout your life, have you used a budget?
No, I'd have to say no. I'm really bad. I haven't ever worked to a budget. I'm thinking about doing one now because I really don't know how much money I need to live on. I've never calculated it. I've never had to because, I've always had enough kind of money coming through. So this week I'm actually going to, start doing a budget for the first time, yeah. So
wow. Did you talking to me on this podcast have any influence on that?
no, none whatsoever. It's just something that, oh my God, I'm only getting this amount of money every week from the government. I better actually find out how much a week it actually costs me to live, to see how many of my savings I'll have to dip into to actually, afford a car and, stuff like that. So
yeah. Okay, what's a fantastic financial decision you've made, and then what's a terrible financial decision that you've made?
The best financial decision I ever made was to buy my first house in Sydney when I was 23. In the 1980s, housing was really affordable in Sydney. I paid my first house off in 8 years, and then I was able to buy a bigger house, and then another bigger house. I'm in my third house in Sydney now. But, I bought it when it was so affordable, and now it's just so astronomical. You could never afford to buy a house in Sydney unless you had an incredible amount of money. So my initial investment has jumped, I would say, almost 20-fold. So that was the best investment I've ever made.
Wow. Good work. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know it was going to happen. My mother was trying to get me out of group houses. So she suggested that, we go halves and buy a house in Sydney so I didn't have to, she was worried about, drugs and rock and roll and, getting me out of houses that would lead me astray.
What's a group house? What's group houses?
Okay, a group house is like a student house, where you've got 10, young people living in a house together. You usually do it when you're a student because it's cheap, So, yeah, so that was my best financial decision, which was probably my mother's financial decision rather than mine, but there you go. I don't think I've ever made a terrible one.
Yes, you have, Trudy. Go into the back of your brain. Somewhere you did something. Today, you're going to buy a boat.
Yeah, actually, that's probably going to be the worst financial decision I've ever made, you're right. That'll probably be the money pit, but yeah. I mean, I guess I am really cautious. I don't know. Oh, there's a kookaburra.
Trudy, I mean, you're an amazing interview, but the kookaburra is the highlight of the day.
And you should see them. They're like scary birds, like they eat meat. Like they don't eat like insects, they eat meat. So they eat snakes and lizards. And so you go out on the deck and you actually feed them meat, like mince and stuff like that. And they've got these amazing long beaks that are like arrows. So they spear and they're not nice birds, but there you go.
I don't know that I have a pastime of I go to like different zoos or different nature preserves, and they all have like online cameras that you can it's just a 24-hour camera and you can check in on the penguins or something. So after this, I'm going to find a kookaburra. I'm going to find a kookaburra camera, and like watch some.
Excellent. Yeah, no, they're scary, scary stuff. I mean, we've got so many animals and whatever that are scary stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's terrifying.
I've got spiders in my backyard that can kill you.
Oh boy. Well, it's been nice knowing you.
Funnel web spiders. So they've only just developed a vaccine in the last 5 years, but before that we all used to just die. So you can't leave your shoes outside on the ground because they'll crawl in it. We were taught as kids to always bash our shoes before we put on them to get the spiders out.
Wow.
Yeah, terrible.
My goodness. Okay, the things we're learning here for when we go to Australia.
I was about to say, I'm going to have to give you a list. You can't go into rock pools in the sea because there's blue-ringed octopus that can kill you. And I'll just give you a list of places that you shouldn't go.
But a theater. We can go in a theater and hopefully we're good in there.
Well, at the moment you can't, but yes.
Well, yeah. Okay, so you sort of answered this question, and it's going to be different because you're in Australia. Do you have an entity corporation? What's your situation with that?
Okay. I'm a company, so over here I'm a proprietary limited. So basically I'm the same as anybody else's company. Yeah, so I'm a company but with a sole employee, which is me.
Okay. Is it called anything else, or it's just Trudy Dalgleish?
It's Dalgleish Designs Proprietary Limited.
Okay. Did you have to fill out a form and create that?
Yeah, I mean, basically it just makes more sense financially. I mean, basically I have an accountant, and my accountant suggested when I first started earning enough money, you have to earn a certain amount of money to be able to create a a company in Australia. So you have to have a certain turnover each year. So when I got to that amount, he suggested that I become a company. And it's great, my company owns my car. My company kind of owns an office in my house. So, I'm able to tax deduct stuff there. Invoicing and stuff like that, it goes to my company. There's a lot of pluses to having a company rather than being a sole trader. Here he is. Here he is. That's a kookaburra. In fact, that's 3 kookaburras. There you go. Next door's feeding them, so they're a bit frenzied.
That is so awesome.
I'm so glad that you actually heard one because we've got so many of them. And it's such an Australian sound, a kookaburra.
That's awesome. Thank you, next door.
So there you go.
That's awesome. Okay, your sole proprietorship, where along your career did you make enough money that you did that?
Probably about 6 to 8 years in.
So when you were doing rock and roll?
No, actually after that. So when I was at the Sydney Entertainment Centre, I was an employee of the Sydney Entertainment Centre. So when I got out of the Sydney Entertainment Centre and started going freelance, it took me about 5 years before I could become a company. When I started doing a lot of design work.
Okay. How much money is it that you have to turn over, and does that number change each year, or is it sort of been like the same number forever?
To become a company in Australia, you have to have an annual turnover of $100,000 or more, and you can't fall below that level.
So you can't open it and then the next year, if you don't make it, you have to give it up or something?
Yeah, so, it doesn't make financial sense or tax sense to have it because there's fees associated with having a company. So if you don't earn a certain amount of money, it's not worth having one. Been lucky to have the company for a long time now, which is great. You
have an accountant. Did you have them, have you always had an accountant from your very first year working?
Yeah. Well, from the 2 years before I became a company. So I left the EntCent. I did a couple of years just, head electrician on tours around Australia. Then when I just started to get design work, I got an accountant. And then 2 years later, we made the company. And I've had the same accountant forever.
Amazing. Okay, so here in the U.S., we have W-2 income, which is when you're an employee, and then we have 1099, which is an independent contractor. So I'm assuming all of your stuff now would be 1099.
It's hard because I'm an employee of my company. So me personally, I pay personal income tax, which I think so I'm employed by my company. I pay personal income tax like, anybody, who worked for another company did. My company pays tax as well, and in Australia we have BAS, which is every quarterly you have to pay your tax. We have GST, which is a goods and service tax on everything. So whether it be a pen or or a can of tomatoes or whatever, we pay GST on that. Quarterly I have to tell the government how much GST I've paid and how much GST I've collected. So on my invoices, it's 10%. Say if I charge somebody $10,000, $1,000 of that, I have to charge them $11,000 because I have to, charge them 10% GST. Then I pay that $1,000 to the government, but I get $10,000. So it's ridiculously convoluted and just a great way for the government to, collect lots of tax on everything. A goods and services tax. So, it's on absolutely everything. It's only been in for the last 10 years and there was huge uproar when it came in. And it's put a lot more time into basically doing accounts every quarter. And I'm always late. I'm always getting fined for reporting late because I just don't have the time to do stuff like that, And it means that I do have to sit down and for, 2 hours or whatever and go through it. Yes, I'm always being in the bad books with the government. But there you go.
Every quarter, is that you sitting down or is it your accountant?
No, it's me because I have to get all the receipts out. I'm really terrible. I'm still, pieces of paper and receipts in a shoebox. I'm not lovely online stuff, so my accountant pulls his hair out because he gets a big shoebox every year.
See, I do the shoebox thing, but I also have all the so much online. So for me, it's a headache. It's like, oh, I got to go through this credit card. I got to go through this credit card. I got to go through this credit card and see what. Then I have to go through all the receipts. And then I have to make sure I'm not counting those receipts as some of the ones that were on the credit card. But what I do is I then put it in an Excel document and I pass that along.
Oh, well, you are very good. My accountant would love you.
Yeah, well, I should just give them all the receipts and see what they do. But I feel like they would just charge me a lot of money.
I kind of, it's kind of like I have to like do it every quarter. So kind of it's a bit organised because it's, quarterly. It's not just, here's a shoebox, work it out. But yeah, I can't bring myself to, life's too short. Do accountancy stuff and, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so your retirement plan.
Yeah.
This is going to be different than us.
Yeah.
But what is like your plan for retirement, and what is it made up of?
Okay, so basically in Australia, from your first paycheck to your last paycheck, 10% of that paycheck goes into a superannuation fund, which is basically a pension fund. So by law, every time you get a paycheck, some of that pay goes into a superannuation fund, which is really clever because it means that, the government doesn't have to rely on pensions. There is disparity that people that work really hard and, get more money, than people who are casual or whatever. But still, even casuals by law have to have a superannuation fund. If you get into financial trouble, you're able to access that superannuation fund at an earlier time. For instance, at the present moment, with many people unemployed, the government's just brought out that you can access, I think it's $20,000 of your superannuation and pull it out now if you so need it. So it's a really good forced savings. I've had a superannuation fund since I was 18, which has grown wonderfully. So I'm not going to be a little old lady eating baked beans on toast, which will be good. So, yeah, I think Australia's done it really, really well that way, because they saw that there was, a huge population explosion when I was a kid and that they weren't going to be able to afford to pay pensions to everybody. So that's when they brought in the compulsory superannuation. And I think it's worked really well, depending how the stock markets go in the next year or so. But, I'm sure they'll bounce back as they traditionally have.
Oh, yeah. I'm not worried.
And what about you guys? You just do you have pension?
Well, wait, actually, one more question about your annualizations. Can you decide how it's invested?
Yeah. Yeah, basically you can choose the fund it goes into, and then you can, from that fund, you can choose whether you want managed funds, shares, cash, how you want your money invested. So, when I was younger, I had it in more high risk options in superannuation, but now I'm getting older, I'm in managed funds and safer funds. So you can move it around. You can move it around every week if you want. It's a huge industry in Australia, the superannuation industry, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And then also, it doesn't matter what job you're working, it still goes into that independent fund.
Yeah. So basically, when you change jobs, you just tell your new employer what superannuation fund you're in. And for me, it doesn't matter because my company just pays the maximum amount of super. It's a minimum of 10, but you can, lately I've been putting like 20, 30% in, just to kind of top it up.
Good work.
For the boat.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great idea.
We have something here in the USA called Social Security.
Yeah. So we have a thing called Job Seeker, which is basically unemployment benefits. So if you're unemployed, you go on Job Seeker, which I think is $500 a week. So a lot of people who live by the beach and go surfing every day are on Job Seeker unemployment benefits.
But how long does that last?
Well, as long there's no time that it will finish. If you can't find a job, then they just keep paying you, which is pretty bad. Which is why there's a lot of people bludging up the beach on what we call the dole. Yeah.
So in theory, you could graduate from school and then go on to Job Seeker and then live out your life and die?
We have third generation people, who the third generation is on the dole. I know, it's a really bad system. They've tried to make it a bit harder now that you have to prove that you've gone and had interviews So every month you have to prove to who you've spoken to about getting a job. So they've made it a bit more proactive, but still it never runs out.
So is your annualization thingamabob, that's your retirement? Outside of retirement, do you have any investments?
No. Just the houses. Worst comes to worst, I could sell one. I don't think I'm going to have to because I do have a good superannuation fund. So just to warn you, the dogs might come in a minute. So
all right, we get kookaburra and dogs. Are these dingoes? This is what I know of Australia.
One is a dingo, cross Kelpie. So, yes, and he is wild. He's only 10 months old and he was found in the bush.
Oh, my goodness.
So he's a bit wild. We're still trying to train him into being a decent dog. It's a dingo cross Kelpie, which Kelpies are half dingoes anyway. Kelpies are our Australian working dog, so they round up the sheep and stuff like that. He's got a double dash of it. We call him Devil Spawn.
I hope I get to meet him.
Yep, so go on, sorry.
What job have you had that's been the most lucrative for you?
I guess the most lucrative are the ceremonies. So opening and closing ceremonies pay really, really, really well. I did the opening ceremony of the Arab Games in Doha in 2011, I think it was. And that was probably the most lucrative. But the week before, for the same company, I'd lit Moscow University for 10 days, and that was pretty lucrative too. So we basically did projection mapping on one of the big buildings in Moscow and basically had to meld all the buildings around it into that projection. And I think 3 million people turned up. That was the same company, David Atkins Enterprises, and he's done big things all around the world. He did the Vancouver Olympics opening and closing ceremonies. Opening and closing ceremonies, definitely, because there's TV involved. There's live to air broadcast. I love doing big things. I really, really do. And then when you come back to theatre, it's a lot easier because it's so contained instead of this huge picture.
That's amazing. Well, and when you do the opening closing, are you just doing part of it?
No, the whole kit and caboodle.
Very impressive.
A lot of people split it up between the ceremony bit and the artistic bit, but it's called the cultural bit, which is where, the fun stuff. But when we do it, we do all of it. Yeah, so it's quite a challenge because, you've got to do proper TV letting.
That's amazing. Okay, your professional network and your personal support system, how have those worked in your life? Are those the same things?
Yeah, I think with the majority of people that, work in this industry, you don't actually have time to have kind of friends or relationships outside of the industry, really. Most of my friends, I first met in the industry. Yeah, I think the two are really blurred, basically, because otherwise who else would understand the hours we work? And I don't know how you guys done it. You obviously don't work in the same industry.
No, it's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes it's awesome. And sometimes it's...
Because we work so hard, when we're in a show, we're working 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and that one day off, you're doing your washing or sleeping or, there's no getting anything out of you.
Some of the people that listen to this podcast are not theater people or entertainment people, and I say on this podcast, I say the same thing you're saying, 16-hour days, 6 days a week. And I think people don't actually believe that. Because they just don't work in the industry and they don't have concept of it and they just think it's something I'm saying. But it's no, really, you do that and you don't have time to think. Your brain does crazy things after a week or two of doing that. It's just
and for it to get a major musical up, you're doing that for 6 weeks. At least you eventually fall into you've got the morning session, the afternoon session, and the evening session. So it kind of your day is split into 3 bits. You kind of get used to it, I think. Though I do think it's a young person's industry. Do you know what I mean? I think the older you get, the harder it is to do those hours under that kind of pressure because you are under intense pressure the whole entire time.
Oh, why do we do it? We don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I certainly haven't ever done anything else. So,
Yeah. How much of your success has been hard work versus luck?
Most of it's been hard work. Basically doing everything that you can, accepting whatever work, doing stuff for free. But also to be really successful, you have to have that 1 or 2 moments of complete luck. No matter how hard you work, hard work's not enough. You have to have that break, lucky break. So, I can think of, 2 lucky breaks I've had that have enabled me to be as successful. I mean, I see a lot of people who work really, really hard and they just don't get that 1 or 2 lucky breaks, and they just, they don't make it to that next level. So it's a mixture of the two.
Yeah. Okay, what were your 2 lucky breaks?
My 2 lucky breaks, one was having met somebody at NIDA who then gave me my first lighting design when the designer they had fell through. I met them at a dinner party and they said, I'm looking for a lighting designer. So that was pure luck. The other was getting a tour of Southeast Asia with the Bolshoi Ballet, and I just happened to walk into my old work office, and there was a guy there who was looking for a stage manager slash lighting designer. He was just casually talking to my ex-boss, and I piped up and said, I can do both, and both of those situations, I was just in the right place at the right time.
Wow. That's awesome. Just for the record, those were lucky, but you then went and put a bunch of hard work into that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can't have a lucky break and fail.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so we're heading to the wrap-up now. What is your financial goal for this year?
To survive it, basically, without spending too much money, I think is my financial goal for this year. To start a budget and find out how much I actually need to live on each week. Yeah, basically to come out of it without spending too much of my savings. Trying to survive. I mean, I'm hoping that we'll be open by November. I've got a couple of operas in South Australia and they've had no cases now for a month. So I'm hoping that, social distancing will finish there soon and I'll be able to start work in November.
Well, for Broadway, it's like they just have to wait for a vaccine. So they haven't announced it yet or haven't made the decision, but it's presumably they'll open up in like January of next year to start load-ins and stuff like that.
There must be a lot of people who won't come back to the industry, though, don't you think, that would have had to have gone and find work elsewhere and will never come back? And I reckon we're going to have a missing generation in theatre workers because of this year.
Okay, what is your personal goal for this year? Probably
to enjoy the time off. Because I never get any time off. I'm finding that difficult at the moment mentally because I need something, a bit more mentally. So, get a bit more fitter and active and basically enjoy the time off I have, because I know that if work comes back, I'll never have this time back again. So, try and enjoy it instead of, fighting, kicking and screaming against it.
If money wasn't an issue, what would your life's goal be?
I think I'd travel heaps, but I still always want to work. I think lighting design is something that you can do until the day you drop, whether it be a little cabaret or a little opera or something like that. So I'll always want to work. So I think, travel more, spend some more time traveling, I think.
I love it. Okay, what financial advice would you give yourself back when you started, or would you give somebody that's starting right now?
The advice I'd give of somebody starting now is start saving for your retirement right now. Like, whether you're 16, 20, 25, start putting something in of every paycheck into a savings account, and, that way you'll be nice and comfortable. But, yeah, I can't stress that enough. And even if it's a little bit, it all adds up. And I think that would be the best advice I could give anybody, no matter what industry they were in. Save for your retirement. You don't want to be a little poor old man or poor old lady, eating baked beans in a cold apartment somewhere.
That is solid advice. I love that. Okay, so now some questions from Nicole, my wife, who is a non-artist. Why do a majority of artists have zero savings or retirement savings?
Our industry doesn't pay very much, unless you're at the very, very top of your game. The majority of people in our industry are casuals, freelancers. They live on a paycheck-to-paycheck basis. So that's why no one's got any money. The work isn't constant. You have to really love doing what we do to kind of live through that situation. But, that's why no one's got any savings, because what they earn, they used to live on, and work isn't always there. I mean, it's easier, I think, for us than it is for performers. You'll find a lot more performers with zero savings. If I'm not designing, I could go and do a rig or do a bump in or bump out, load in or a load out, when I was younger, not anymore, thank you, to earn some money. I think that's why that they don't have any, because whatever they earn, they used to live on. That means you've got to really love what you do in this industry. A lot of people love our industry, and that's why they put up with the financial difficulties associated with our business.
Yeah. How will COVID-19 affect the future of your industry? That's
a really good question and a great unknown. Last year, would we have ever thought we were sitting here talking about, Broadway shut till January, and will people want to come back? Will people want to be squished in like sardines like they are in New York theatres, which are the most squishy theatres I've ever sat in? I hate sitting in a New York theatre at the best of times, let alone post-COVID-19. There'll be a lot more outdoor events, because here they're relaxing, social distancing and outdoors. So I think there'll be a lot more outdoor events. Also smaller theatre projects. I think it'll be a very, very long time until big musicals come back and people are allowed to sit in, 1,500 seat theatres without social distancing. I think it'll affect it greatly in the short term until they get a vaccine. Basically, outdoor theatre, I think, here we come, which of course will be seasonal,
Right, yeah. Interesting. You're the first person to mention outdoor theatre.
Oh, well, here they're already doing drive-in concerts. So, you get in your car, you go like you did to the drive-in movies, but you see a concert. So they've already started doing that around Australia. Pop singers and rock singers do concerts, and you turn up in your car, you stay in your car. Yeah, so it's already happening here.
Is now a good time for students to study art?
Any time is a good time for students to study art, although if you're looking for financial security and constant work, then the arts may not be your best choice in life. But, I think any time is a good time to study art.
Yeah. Big cities like Sydney are artist hubs. With everything that's going on, should artists still move to big cities?
Theatre practitioners, certainly. Big city is certainly the best place to be. However, at the present moment, a big city is probably not the best place to be. But in the long run, a big city is where you've got a better chance to make a living from being a theatre practitioner. I think an artiste, you can work anywhere. In fact, probably artists are better working, in natural environments, not in big cities. But certainly in our industry, you need to be in a big city if you want to earn a living, I think.
Do you have unions down in Australia?
We certainly do have unions.
Are you in it? I
used to be, when I was a head electrician, when I was a crew member, head electrician, floor spot operator, when I was at the Sydney Entertainment Centre, I was in a union. But we don't have unions like you do for creatives, directors, designers. We don't have a scenic design union or anything like that. So I'm not in a union anymore because there isn't one to look after me, basically.
Yeah. Would it be good to have one, do you think?
Definitely, because our wages basically haven't gone up in 10 years. So I'm still getting the same lighting design fee for a show that I got 10 years ago. We've lost our royalties. We used to get royalties for our original designs, and now we get a weekly fee. We do get taken advantage of a little bit. So I guess a union in that respect would be really good.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
No royalties. I used to love royalties.
That when you were the electrician, what does that union do for its workers? Just keeps the wages going up?
Yeah, it keeps the wages going up, keeps perks like live-to-air broadcast fees and things like that open. Yeah, negotiates with producers when necessary. Yeah, so they're really strong, not as strong as your local one.
Yeah.
But still.
But that's only in
New York.
That's only Broadway, only big shows. Yeah.
They also cover journalists as well. So, it's a bit of a weird mix there.
Well, maybe in your current state of downtime, you could create a branch of it that's for the designers.
Yeah, that's true. Get all of us together. That's another thing too, is that we never kind of meet, especially lighting designers.
Right.
You never meet because you're always on another show to that lighting designer. So,
yeah.
It's very, very rare that two lighting designers will be in the same room together.
If this weren't going on, I probably never would have been talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Kathy Perkins, who's another lighting designer. Steve Woods, he's another lighting designer. And then I talked to Peter Kazarowski. I never would have talked to these people if this hadn't happened. And it's sort of cool to talk to like other lighting designers because they just understand.
Yeah, it's the same tribe.
Yeah. Okay, final two questions. What separates those that have a career in theater versus those that stop or never get started?
I think basically blind pig-headedness and a very, very strong competitive streak and never giving up what you want to do. You know, if you want to do it that much, you do whatever you do, whether you get paid or not, you know. So, yeah, basically blind pig-headedness and a big competitive streak helps heaps. Thank you, Mum and Dad.
I love it. Okay, final question. Where can people find out more about you?
That's a good question. That's a really good question, actually. People can always email me. You know, it's quite easy to get my email. I'm on LinkedIn. They can email me on LinkedIn if they've got any questions or would like to say hi or whatever.
Or they're coming to Australia and they want to sail.
Yeah, if they want to sail around some, Avoca Beach, more than happy to get in touch with me.
Awesome.
Well, I hope you make it to Australia. It's a beautiful country, and we're nice and safe, and you should incorporate New Zealand into your trip as well.
Well, that's why it's been so long in the making, because it's like you have to go so far to get there that it's like you want to spend time there. So you want to spend like 2 weeks at least.
As opposed to my 36 hours in New York in January.
Right. You were here for 36 hours and you got lighting information for Yiddish Fiddler, and you were doing another show too?
Yeah, I went and saw Secret Garden at the Lincoln Center. You know how they've got a lot of Broadway shows on DVD. So I went and saw that because we were going to do a production of Secret Garden. But of course that got canned as well. And I managed to see a couple of shows too. I saw Jagged Little Pill and Moulin Rouge and saw you all in 36 hours.
And I remember I was like, come over and see West Side Story. And you were like, yeah, I'm already doing these other shows.
It took me longer to get there and get back than I was in New York. So that was a bit crazy, but there you go. I had some work. I had to, work calls. You got to get back.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. All right, well, Trudy, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting.
Oh, thank you, Ethan. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That was our interview with Trudy Dalgleish. My takeaways were: save, starting with your first job. At some point, you will need to rely on your savings, whether it is in retirement or during a pandemic. Be a hard worker. Luck plays a part, but without hard work, luck isn't helpful. Working in a country that prioritizes a retirement savings plan for all workers is a good place to be. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg. Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance. Find more information on our website, artisticfinance.com. Please subscribe to our podcast and please leave a rating and review. Artistic Finance is produced in New York City by Nicole and Ethan Steimel. Producing consultant Ann Nygren Doherty. Graphics and website by Josh Cutler. Music by Chong Liu.